y'all. Welcome to Parent Empowerment with Mandy Drogin. I'm Mandy. I'm just a mom sitting down with real Texas parents having real conversations about what's going on in our schools. Today, I'm joined by a father of two and an ISD trustee from a local public school district here in Texas. Rob McClelland has joined us. Rob, thank you for being here.
Mandy, nice to be with you today. Thanks for having me.
So here on Parent Empowerment, we just want to talk about what really matters to parents. Can you talk to us about what matters to you as a parent and how that led you to get involved and run for office?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So I've spent most of my life in some type of service. I was in the Army for 12 years. So when I left A&M, went and started a military career, I took my wife all the way across the world to Germany for our first assignment. So my life has very much been one in which I have been put in positions and given opportunities to serve. That's kind of the way God made me, is the way I like to look at it, absolutely. And so we decided, I was finishing up my time at D.C., I was at the White House military office, great assignment, that we were going to move back home. I grew up in South Texas. My wife's a native Austinite, so this is home for us, and it was time for us to do that. So, long story short, we moved to Texas, moved out to a suburb here of the Austin area, fell in love with it, and immediately got our kids involved in the public school system. And we actually moved to this district that I'm now a trustee of because it is so impressive.
Yeah.
So high performing. And it has been known throughout the state to be a very high performing school district. And so we moved here, got involved, and immediately started to engage in that community, right? So we have our faith community, we have our sports community, and then we have our school community. I think that's indicative of so many different parents out there that those are their circles.
Yep,
right?
Absolutely.
And so we got heavily involved in that. And believe it or not, as it started, my wife was much more involved in that stuff than I was. Fast forward to COVID, experienced that. That was awful. We all remember that. But in the midst of that, we started to identify some things that were happening in our school system. We're kind of like, wait a minute. This is not in line necessarily with what we expected as parents, right?
Can you give us some examples?
Yeah, I mean, the mask debate was huge, right? And so in our community, that was a non-starter, and it was kind of forced on our kids, and that created some serious tension in the community. And so what we decided to do as parents is we kind of came together and we said, hey, I think it's time to change things up a little bit. And so we started in 2021 by getting a good friend of mine elected onto our school board. She's a patriot. She's amazing. So we got her elected. 2 years later, we followed that up with getting two more folks elected that were very much in the same mindset about how we should be governing our schools, specifically around the kind of the post-COVID era and the things we should never do again.
You're talking about parents. When you say we, parents locked arms.
Grassroots organization,
That's right.
Parents locking arms. This is no PACs involved with any of this. This is no organization. This was simply a grassroots effort about parents all in our community, which turns out to be the vast majority of parents share these same beliefs. And we came together and we said, hey, it's time for us to put ourselves in a position to where the values of this community are embodied within those who are going to govern our schools.
Love it.
So fast forward to 2023 now, my phone starts to ring. I said, hey, Rob, it's your turn. I said, my turn for what? He said, hey, we'd love you to consider, putting yourself in there for school board. And I said, thanks, but no thanks, right? Find me the horse to get behind, and I'll get behind the horse, and let's do it kind of deal, which I had been done previously. I was excited about that. However, I'm a very spiritual guy, and I felt the Lord really leading me strongly to go out there and lead out. I've never run for office before. I've never done anything like that. But I felt strongly in this kind of spiritual encounter with the Lord and said, man, I want you to put yourself out there. And so I had a kind of a moment with the Lord. I said, okay, Lord, if that's the case, why don't you affirm it? Like, let's do a little Habakkuk from the book of Habakkuk in the Bible. Like, why don't you affirm this, kind of put it back on the Lord, and next thing you know, the affirmation was amazing. Both financial support, and so I went all in. Went through an election.
That affirmation, did that come from other parents that were saying,
all parents in the community? Yeah, absolutely. There was no group.
I'm hammering that because this is all about empowering parents to take back what is rightfully ours.
That's right.
And that is the control of our children's education.
100%. All parents.
So parents were joined together, and now you were being tapped.
Now I was being tapped.
Yep.
And so I once I accepted that opportunity, we went through the election cycle, and again, it was an amazing experience. I was fortunate enough to win a seat on the board in 2023, so now I'm in my second year, so I'm new to this.
Okay.
So you may ask some things today. We may talk about some stuff like, I'm still learning, but here's your point, and here's the point I want to make that aligns with what you're doing here with this podcast, is truly that now our board is comprised of almost exclusively parents.
That's awesome.
Which I think is a strength of ours, right? We do have some other members that were parents and had kids in the district and have some great experience, which is also extremely valuable.
Sure.
But there are parents that are governing our school district in our community. And that is what I think is what's best. That is what we have done. And so I'm proud to be able to do that.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing kind of your path to get on the board. And when you talk about it's definitely a learning experience, right?
For
not
sure.
just the campaigning, but also the governing
That's right.
part of it. And so let's jump into some of the juicy details of the governing aspect. And you mentioned the education component.
Yeah.
You know, there's an entity that I hear about all the time when I'm talking to really amazing trustees like yourself that want to do what's right for the kids in their community, uphold the value system that 99% of Texans support. It's the Texas Association of School Boards that provides a lot of education and guidance. And you mentioned, and I confirmed with you earlier about a recent meeting, a conference that this organization hosts. I think they do it at least quarterly, from what I'm told, to educate school board members on best practices and what to do. And
we have a couple annual conferences that we attend, yes.
Yes, okay. And it was other school board members, let me be clear. Other school board members had reached out and said, you are not going to believe what just happened. A massive, one of the largest taxpayer-funded lobbying organizations that was a speaker for this education conference proceeded to tell y'all, don't give pay raises. We're going to need these as leverage. Yeah. So I heard it, and I asked you, and you actually said I was there. So let's hear it firsthand from you.
This would be a good time for the disclaimer to say, hey, so today, everybody, I'm thankful to be here, but I'm talking on, as in my opinion, as Rob McClelland, certainly not on behalf of our district, so I just want to make sure I get that out there. Yeah, so we go to these annual Texas Association School Board conventions and conferences, and let me start with this. There are some very good people in the Texas Association of School Boards.
Sure.
I have had the chance to meet many of them. They are hardworking. They're committed to doing what's best for a number of different things within our state of Texas. So certainly don't want to blanketize anything specifically. Now, specific to what you just mentioned, I was in there. Yeah, absolutely. So we started, and this happens sometimes with some of these sessions. You get people that come with an agenda, right? And the agenda that's kind of formulated within the Texas Association School Board is public school or die kind of deal, right? And I don't prescribe to that. I'm very open to the idea of having options for parents. I believe parents fundamentally are responsible for their children's education. I said that when I was running for office. I say it again. I say it from the dais. I fundamentally believe that. And now I believe public school to be a great option. Yeah. And so that's why I'm committed to helping make it advance. So we're in this deal, and this company is having a deal on budgeting, right? A lot of school districts are in budgeting crises right now, mainly driven by no changes to the student allotment and a lot of different school finance things we might get a chance to talk about.
$7 billion.
There's all kinds of different school it needs to be reformed. Let me just say that right now for the record. We need to reform school finance. That's another conversation. So we're in there, and I'm anticipating a great budget workshop. We're going to dive into some things, maybe get some new ideas, things we hadn't considered, although we're pretty smart. We've considered a lot of things. And I get in there and I sit down, and before we even get into the meat and potatoes of finance, the CEO, who I have no idea, never met before in my life, starts going on a rant. That's the only way I can describe it. It's really a rant about the failure of school board trustees, the failure of teachers to vote a certain way to persuade the legislature to do certain things. And at first I sat there for a first couple minutes. I'm like, I'm uncomfortable because I'm in full disagreement with everything that's coming out of this man's mouth. Right. I'm also like, we're here to talk about budget. Right. We're not here to hear your soliloquy about your opinions on this kind of things. And he got to the point to where, yes, that comment was made. I can affirm that to where it was encouraging us. Yeah, it was encouraging us to utilize compensation as a weapon to try to change the way that our teachers would vote. And that was the point I got up and walked out. There were a few people that followed me because I was not going to be subject myself to that stupidity. Right. To weaponize compensation against our educators.
Just evil mentality.
I mean, it's ridiculous,
it
right?
Is.
It's absolutely ridiculous. It's not appropriate, and certainly not for someone who's trying to advocate on behalf of their business. I mean, I do business development for a living in my day job. That's a poison pill. Yep. And so I found that wildly unacceptable. And actually, in the meeting that followed, one of my colleagues, they actually got into dialogue in the next meeting.
I heard it became a whole thing.
An issue. And it should become an issue because, listen, School board trustees were elected officials. Okay.
Yep.
What happens sometimes, these TASB conferences, they want to take us and treat us kind of like we don't know what we're doing. Right? Like, hey, guys, I know you're an elected official. I know you got, in my case, thousands of votes, right, to serve in this local capacity. Obviously, I'm well accomplished. I have all these skills that I bring to the table. But, hey, we're going to take all that. We're going to put it aside, and we want you all to color inside this box.
And
this box is not necessarily Chapter 11 of the Education Code, which is where we get our charter and our mandate.
Right.
It is, hey, we're going to color inside this box, and don't think about going outside the lines because that's a little disruptive to this thing that we've built. I'm like,
that's right.
Well, that doesn't align with anything I prescribe to as an elected official, right? So, yes, that happened. Yes, that organization's got a lot of that stuff that they're trying to do.
To confirm, this is a massive, one of the largest lobbying entities in Texas. They actually have a former legislator that was on the House Public Education Committee.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yes,
Yeah.
and they give guidance, charge tens of millions of dollars to taxpayers to give guidance. And the guidance that they gave at a recent meeting was to not give your teachers pay raises, especially after they had encouraged the legislators to decline it in the Capitol, $4,000 for each teacher, $7 billion for the public school system. And they had the audacity 8 months later to come in and say, do not give your teachers pay raises because we need to weaponize it in the 89th legislative session.
That was
happened.
the gist of the conversation that was had, yes.
And then it happened again in another.
It did, and it was met with confrontation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
I decided I elected not to. By the way, I can get confrontational, but in that way, it was most appropriate for me to just excuse myself. And there were some other trustees that followed.
You know, I love that because I can only imagine that those trustees, probably most of them were parents themselves, and like you and myself, you just want to do what's best for your kids.
That's right.
And for the kids that they're going to go to school with, and the kids they're going to grow up with, and the kids they're going to live in Texas with when they're adults.
Yep.
Well, thank you for having the courage to say the quiet part out loud and say it. And God bless you and the individuals that confronted this really, really crazy behavior by people that are paid with millions of taxpayer dollars to supposedly advocate for our teachers and kids.
That's ridiculous rhetoric.
Yeah.
Right? And it has no place anywhere, especially trying to convince elected officials to do such a thing. Wildly inappropriate and unacceptable.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that story about what occurred. So let's talk about some other issues that are plaguing far too many schools across our great state. And that's this culture war, far left progressive ideology that has really creeped into our curriculum, the programs, libraries, and some rogue teachers are engaging in this in their classrooms. So can you talk to me about, unfortunately, maybe what you all have seen, whether it's in your district or talk to other trustees about, and what you're doing to combat it?
Sure, that's a great point. And obviously that is a thing, right? We know that, and it's one of the main drivers why you're seeing so much concern and utter rejection of the public school system in regards to some of these things. So let's first acknowledge that there's some challenges there. I want to take a little step back and talk more broadly, and then maybe dive into the school district. I think we first need to understand that we have a societal challenge with this. Right, secular progressivism has worked its way into the fabric of society.
Yes.
Right, so it's no surprise that in that it has worked its way into the school system. But let's also acknowledge it's worked its way into a lot of institutions, right? Higher education institutions. I hate to say this as a former vocational minister, the church, right, has worked its way into the fabric of that, into our military. I was a 12-year military officer, right? The stuff that we're dealing with today was never part of anything we would ever consider in the military when I was an officer there, and all the way up to a major. And so it was and by the way, for everybody who's serving, thank you. Please continue to do so. We need you. This won't be like this forever.
That's right.
So now let's dive into public education, or really education in general, because it's not exclusive to public education, right? It's worked its way into a lot of things. Here's the deal. There are challenges around that because, again, we have as a society have decided that there's certain things that we never would have thought would have been okay that are now okay. Let's do a great example. Let's talk about Title IX. Right? Title IX was designed most specifically to protect and provide young girls and women an opportunity to compete. Right? all this went into that. It's a phenomenal program. Obviously now, I have a daughter, 14 years old, high school. She's going to be in cross country. She's got every opportunity she wants to do to succeed in any way that she can. I'm so thankful that exists. Well, now there was an attempt that's now been, looks like, thwarted to rewrite that, to allow men to compete against women in sports. Now, thank God our state stepped up and said, no. This is going to be illegal in Texas, right? Like that is some kind of profound stance, right? That is common sense.
That's right.
It is absolutely common sense.
Yes.
What we've lost in institutions, and education is a part of this, we have wonderful, amazing, smart people.
Yep.
What we lack is common sense. We've stopped governing and leading in a way in which this doesn't make sense. We should not do this. The pressures to incorporate these things into the fabric of the institution is enormous, right? We had that in my district, where we were considering some policy changes. And before we could even really dive into the policy changes and look at it, there were some things that are being stricken from the policy and recommendations to us around gender identity and things like that. And we got attacked in our school board meeting. Hundreds of, over 100 people, the ACLU of Texas, Equality Texas, all these different secular progressive organizations mobilized and berated us for an hour and a half on the dais.
What were they saying? Give us
my
real
gosh.
example,
It
because
was-
you're talking. So we hear this. I hear this from trustee after trustee, and thank you all for taking that on. And that's what they do, right? They mobilize them, they bus them in, they tell them where to go, and they fight back and tell you how terrible you are. Because as a parent, I have 2 daughters and was an athlete in high school as well, and you just go, this is common sense. What's
right.
wrong with you people?
It's
Boys
absolutely
and
common sense,
girls
right.
are different.
So because we want to kind of take a common sense approach to governance, the theme was, and by the way, I don't blame any of the people that came to speak to us. They was incited for a political purpose.
Yes.
To be super clear.
Yep.
So if there's somebody watching who was in that, I'm not upset with you. You have a right to speak in that. You're never going to get stopped. As far as you have a right to your opinion,
Sure.
and I will always listen. They were incited. So that's a whole different, that's a whole other problem.
Right.
Let's put that aside. But it was very much accused us of being bigots.
Yeah.
The words that were used were not profane, but on the border of it, and it was hurtful, right? That because we want to have a level playing field with every single one of our kids,
Yes.
that we are going to we hate a segment of the population.
Right.
That is absolutely
nonsense.
fundamentally untrue.
Right.
Right. It's not it's a fallacy.
Yes.
And so we came under attack for this, and we were personally threatened by these organizations.
Can you
Litigation, personal litigation.
So that's what we
all
hear
those
a lot.
types of things.
They threaten. It's the litigious nature of,
Absolutely.
if you don't do this, we're going to sue you. And
That's
as a
right.
responsible trustee, you're going, wait a second, you could run up our legal bills, and they
They
do.
would.
They
Absolutely
do.
would. At the burden of the taxpayer.
And right,
Absolutely.
at the burden of the taxpayer,
Correct.
but also at the detriment to our kids.
1,000%.
Yes, look,
It's the balance that we have to-
We're telling it
Yep.
like what's going on, so parents know you're not crazy. This is what happens, and
That's
this
right.
is how this has creeped into our schools.
That's correct.
Is the threat or the action of lawsuits by entities like ACLU and other far left ideologues
Mm-hmm.
that want this in your classrooms to effectively groom kids
That's
to
right.
have a certain ideology. Okay, I like to get it all out there.
No, we're being frank here.
Yep.
These are the challenges that local school boards are being faced with.
Right.
Right. And so we got to acknowledge that there are obstacles, there are challenges in governing in a common sense way.
Yes.
Because we are getting a lot of pressure. We, as in school boards all over the nation, are getting a lot of pressure to bow, to concede, to do all these things that don't align with any type of common sense.
Right.
That as we know it today, they don't align with biology. They don't align with any
Right.
scientific or otherwise, and certainly not anybody who's like myself who's got a biblical worldview.
Right.
Right. We are now the enemy.
Yes.
Right. And it's like that has been overwhelming. The amount of forces that are trying to work against simply having common sense governance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing what happens to not only your school board, but we have over 1,200 school districts
We do.
across Texas, and it's happening to all of them. It's happening everywhere. They know, and quite frankly, I'll say, unfortunately, a lot of the guidance that comes out of these law firms and associations, they'll tell you to bend a knee.
that is typically the guidance, and there's a very risk-adverse environment.
Talk about that,
right?
please.
So, I mean, you got to think about it, too. You made the point. The potential for litigation is high. It's almost certainty.
Right.
It's almost going to happen.
Yes.
So, hey, this may be expensive and painful to go through, so it's okay. It's not the dog isn't worth the fight, so to speak, right? Well, I don't prescribe to that.
Right.
Right. Here's what I say about that. I said, hey, listen, first, are we doing the right thing? Okay? Are we embodying the values of our community in what we're doing? Are we making sure every single kid has the same protections and the same opportunity? That's the first question you ask. And if you're not asking that question, you should at least leave because you're not asking the right question.
Right.
So we answer that question first. Now, after you've answered that question, you go, okay, well, we're right. So now what's going to cost to be right? Mm-hmm. Well, that's the dilemma.
Right.
That's the rub. And for me, listen, what I say is I'm not worried about getting sued. I just don't want to lose. I don't want to lose.
I love it.
Right? And I don't want to lose because if I'm losing, then I'm on the wrong side of the law.
Yes.
Which I don't want to be on the wrong side of the law because I'm not a lawmaker. I don't pass laws. It's my job to operate in accordance with the law. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I have local jurisdiction over some things. I'm going to exercise that jurisdiction in the way in which it aligns with the first thing we talked about. Yeah. Is it what's best for our kids? Does it align with the values of our community? And is it something that we need to be doing? That's typically how we try to work through that.
That's wonderful. I think that is a great message to all trustees and all parents of, is it good for the kids?
That's right.
Can we just protect the kids?
That's right.
Can we just get adult agendas out of it and just say, let's do what's best for our kids?
That's what we should be doing.
That's wonderful. Well, can you talk about some other instances that you guys have encountered where you've had to maybe take a hard stand? You mentioned with the Title IX.
Yep.
Give us some other examples that you know that other trustees are dealing with, and many of them may not have the backing and the team that you had. You mentioned at the beginning that you all really, parents all across the district, fought back. They were empowered to support each other and put parents on the school board. But unfortunately, there are a lot of districts that are still being overseen by entities that maybe they don't have kids or didn't have kids in the district, or they have some ulterior motives, and you're not the majority, you're the minority. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so here's one of the things I think is really, education is really struggling with. And parents, this is where we need to band together. It's really around accountability and discipline of our kids, right? And so this is a little less around, secular progressivism. This is more of like blocking and tackling parenting 101, right? What we've done in education, I mean, if you remember back in the day when we were kids, right? I mean, the principal office was the place to go to get SWATs, right? I mean, like that principal wouldn't mess around, right? You do something irresponsible, you're in trouble, you're going in there and something bad is going to happen, right? Mom, dad's getting the call. Hey, Johnny over here, he's going to get 3 licks and it's not going to be a good day, right? Okay, so that was the 80s when we were growing up. It turned into now we kind of over-rotated to, right?
No discipline.
No discipline, right? It's like, let's have a talk about it.
Uh-huh.
Okay, like your well-framed argument's going to change the mind of this developing teenager.
Right.
Right? I was a very, very, I'm a good kid, I love the Lord, all this kind of stuff, but I was paying the butt as a teenager. You know what I needed? Accountability and discipline, right?
Right.
Kids need structure and discipline. Here's how this works, in my opinion. It's the school district's responsibility to provide the structure.
Yes.
It's our responsibility to provide the structure, the organization, and the opportunity for the kids. It's also the local school district's responsibility for putting parameters and barriers around good order and discipline in our schools. Okay? That is, if we're talking about parent empowerment, that's the beginning and end of that. It's not the school district's job to parent children.
Right.
It is parents' job to parent children. Now, we say that a lot when it comes to like keeping things away from our kids, right? We do, and that, by the way, that's right. Right? We talked about that earlier, right? Yes. The hypersexuality and all this stuff happening all over the places, wildly inappropriate, unacceptable for the school district. So as parents, we're going, whoa, 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 keep that away from my kids.
Right.
Okay, yeah. The other side is now, who is partnering with the local school district to enforce and instill discipline within their children? We can't just have it one way. We got to have it both ways. And one of the biggest challenges we have, believe it or not, is a lack of that.
Yeah.
Right? We don't want to enforce accountability on our kids. And so what will happen is a district may try to enforce accountability, but a parent will rebut it and reject it.
Yep.
It's like, well, wait a minute. Hold on a second. You're just talking over here about, hey, we don't want you doing certain things with our kids without us knowing. Well, we're telling you got a big problem here, and now you're upset we're telling you got a problem. So this is really what I look at education as a whole deal. Some of the other challenges around reading, writing, and arithmetic, which is critical, and that's the reason it exists, right?
Right.
is these variables in which parents, we got to parent. We got to hold our kids accountable. We got to teach them things. And then the school district needs to reinforce and provide the structure and organization. I think that is broken, right? I think that's where we're struggling as a state and as a nation within the parameters of some of those things within our schools.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We go back to this whole restorative justice nonsense.
Right, yeah.
That was, now you can't really discipline them. I can't tell you how many teachers have come up to me and said, look, this kid will destroy my room. It'll take me 2 days to put it back together.
Yep.
They've disrupted, half the day. And they're sent back to my classroom an hour later after, quote, calming down with a juice box and a bag of goldfish. And these teachers are furious. And,
as they should be.
And that's right. That's one of the things about parent empowerment that I send my child to a public charter school, which has a lot of the structure and discipline and expectations. And the public schools can have that. They did. When we were back in school, they did have that.
Yep.
And that's where I think that, you know what, Mom and Dad, if you're into this, I think the new term is maybe gentle parenting or something, where you're not right.
I don't know what that is.
I was raised by a drill sergeant, so God bless
My
you for your
kids have
service.
not had
I
that.
get it right. Nope.
They've had loving parenting.
Yes.
They've had parents who love them.
Right.
That's
and given
right.
structure. But
that's right.
But that's really infiltrated kind of the school system. And if you want to do that, that's great. You should have a choice of where to send your kid to school. And if it doesn't work with the local public school where structure and discipline and safety are enforced in the classrooms, then by all means, go find a gentle teaching school that will allow little Johnny to destroy their school. I don't think it would last very long, and I don't think you...
Yeah, probably not.
I think you would end up with him at home with you to deal with it. But I think that's exactly right, and that, again, goes back to the real litigious nature, unfortunately, of some of these ideologues that don't recognize that when you're raising children, they want that structure. They need those barriers and that guidance. And our teachers need that. They're begging for this.
Yep.
That's what we hear all the time talking to teachers is, please restore my ability to discipline kids. The administration back them up and say, we're not having this.
That's right. It has to work together. Right, it has to work together, and we also got to remember too. The challenge of public school. This is not a burden. This is a responsibility. Public school. every kid who lives in the district and within the boundaries, we're going to take. Right, we're going to take, and there are a lot of kids that are struggling.
Yeah. Right.
They come from difficult family circumstances. They come from different socioeconomic circumstances. Right, and so what the institution of public education needs to do is not go away from structure and discipline. It's to ensure that we have the right structure and discipline that meets the needs of a kid who's from a household X that has two parents and everything is good and they're strong and solid versus one that has a single parent and they're struggling and the parent's working so much that they're not having as much parent involvement. That's a whole different dynamic. Yeah. Right? So but it can't be a one-size-fits-all approach. That's one of the points I'm trying to make with this is so public education really does have some challenges in that we face all the time as we're trying to think out the best policy and the best way in which to govern and set up the parameters of our school system to meet the needs of every single kid that we can find a way to meet the needs of. Yeah, that's right. And that's exactly the intent, obviously, to give the structure and the guidance and provide a really high quality education so our kids can launch. That's right. Be happy, successful, reach their full potential. And I'm fortunate that our district does a very good job at that. Yeah. I mean, our district, I get to brag on my district for a second. You got to bear with me, right? I mean, we are way higher than the state average on pretty much every category, right, of assessments. I mean, we look at STAR because that's the test you take. We look at many other metrics, right? We track growth actually through a whole different philosophy than the STAR and things like that because we care about every single student and how they're progressing, right? I mean, imagine that, putting the kid in their individual development first, right? So there's all those types of things that we care a lot about. Our district does a great job at it, right? It's why people move from where they live now to our town is because of our school district. Now, for me, I don't see why there's not a reason, and there are challenges, that we can't push every single district in the state of Texas to strive for those types of results, right? Because we look at the results across the state, I don't think anybody's satisfied with them. No. Right? How could you be satisfied with half the kids not being able to read on grade third grade level, right? I mean, that's those results are bad, and COVID exacerbated that. And in some areas, it's above, in some areas, it's still trailing behind, right? That goes back to some difficult, I'm going to call them not good decisions in the midst of all that, where we pulled kids out of school for too long, we're still making up for that and all that kind of stuff. And so that was bad, right? And so the results haven't been great. I'm fortunate in the district I'm in, the results are much better, right? But there's a lot of effort going into that. It's a lot of work. And in the case of our community, we said we want to make sure we have people that embody the values and are going to strive for the excellence that we want, and they're going to run the thing.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to do. And so my encouragement to parents that may live in a place where that's not the case, go do what we did, right? What's stopping you?
Yep.
Right? What's stopping you from coming together, finding people that are savvy enough and are capable enough, or heck, just have some common sense, and put them in charge. Give them a chance to run the thing. Give them a chance to move the thing in the right direction, right? Mobilize, come together, go get your school board back.
So let's talk about that a little bit more in depth. You a few years ago, when kind of this mission with parents across socioeconomic spectrum, across race spectrum, that said we're going to take back our schools.
Yep.
You guys have had some encounters with other candidates that were very much cut from the cloth of let's keep moving to the left. Let's keep putting these culture wars into our classrooms. Can you talk about how banding together you were able to stave off a victory there? And from what I hear, this person's coming back.
The struggle is real.
So
Absolutely.
let's hear about it. Not just the locking arms. Let's get down into the details. What did you guys do to really fend this off?
So, boy, there's a lot to it. Here's the first thing. You just got to have the fortitude to know what you're doing is right and continue to rally people to the cause. That's the first thing that you got to do. And the cause is, again, we're not talking about reinventing the wheel here. The cause is simply embodying the values of the community within the school district. That's the cause, right? There's no cause for let's make Rob the whatever, right? There's no personal cause here.
Yes.
It is truly looking out for the best of the kids in our community. And so simply enough, here's what we do. We go and we talk to parents and we tell them this is what's at stake.
Knock on their doors.
That's knocking on doors. We're having events. We're bringing people into my house. I can't remember how many different living room events I've had. It's all grassroots.
Yes.
And you come together. Now in our community, it's tough because you don't have a place where you're just going to go get 300 votes and call it good. You got to get 3,000 to 3,500 votes every time you run in order to get enough votes to do that out of a voting electorate of about 20,000 people, right? Yeah. And so we got to get turnout to be about to at least 20% to get that, right? Especially when the majority of our community would be like-minded to myself, right?
Yes.
It is grassroots, blocking and tackling, knocking on doors, holding events, standing on the side of the road with your sign, going and talking to community groups every year. To continue to rally more people to the cause. Yep. That's where it started in 2021. That's where we are going into 2025. And that's what we have to do every go. And so this is not easy.
Yep.
This is not easy. It takes a lot out of us. But here we are doing it. And we're doing it, why? Because we care about our kids.
That's right.
Right?
You know, it's interesting you talking about that, and because I obviously knew what you guys were doing, and part of the parent empowerment movement was it's going into communities and talking to parents about what this means, and the work doesn't stop, and the number of events continues to grow, but the amazing thing about it, and I assume that your experience is the same because you keep adding to your numbers, but it's that when you talk to real parents, they see the problems too, and they say, sign me up. What do I need to do?
That's exactly
Let's
what
get
they
on
do.
it.
That's exactly what they do. In most cases, Mandy, it's not a matter of not wanting it. It's not being engaged with it.
That's right.
Right? And that we see that in local elections all the time, right? And and a lot until COVID, in most areas, I mean, we had this nationwide conservative revival. Wait, what is happening? Right? And so it just happened in our community. We got hyper involved and engaged, and we did what we felt needed to be done. In other communities, it's kind of, let's just call it, it's trailing a little bit, right? And so where are we now with that, right? We're in a place now where we're having this nationwide movement to say, let's give another option, which, by the way, I've already said, I'm all about parents having the right to choose what's best for their kids, 1,000,000,000%. Here's what we can't do, in my personal humble opinion. We can't give up public education.
Absolutely.
We can't do it. Over 5 million kids, over 1,000 districts across the state of Texas, and God knows how many billions of dollars are being invested in this deal. We cannot just go, well, that was a nice try. It was a good run, everybody.
Right.
Now let's go figure something else out.
Yes.
That's incorrect, in my opinion. We can't do that. Right now, do parents in places where public education is not meeting their need, do they need an option? Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
1,000%. And I will support that. My job and what I'm trying to do, and what my colleagues and I and what our community is trying to do, is to do what's best for kids, where 95% of the kids are going to go to public education.
Yeah.
That's just us, right? That's our community. And so if this thing fails, now what?
That's right. Well, you're 100% correct, and this is something that's so important for the parents of Texas that are listening or watching us talk about this, is that's why it's the parent empowerment movement.
That's right.
I send my child to a public charter school. You do public school. Lots of parents do homeschool or private school or blended learning or virtual, whatever it is. We know and love our kids best, and we want what's best for them.
Yes.
And you started rattling off numbers. We're almost at $100 billion on public education, which is a lot.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
A lot of money.
And something to really hammer the point home is we educate 10% of the nation in Texas public schools. And yet when I think about kind of this really divisive time that we're in, where unfortunately the very loud far left that does not speak for Texas or does not speak for America, but they've created this rift. And the reality is that Texans, look, as goes Texas, so goes the country. And you're exactly right. Empowering parents to get involved in their public ISD school board, to get involved in their public schools, to make choices, to be able to push back. Yes. It's so important, and it's a crucial part of what all of us parents that are raising kids, the next generation of Texas, are trying to do. And that's why we've locked arms, is we can acknowledge that the one-size-fits-all school system doesn't work for every kid, and parents do need choices. But we can lift up our public schools. We can talk about the good, and we do have to talk about the bad and the ugly.
We do.
To make sure that we can fix it.
That's 100% right. I mean, we can't go in with rose-colored glasses going, hey, everything's good, y'all.
That's right.
I can't understand why anybody would be upset about where we are. That's not an appropriate response to this, right? What my goal is to do is to keep raising the bar.
Yes.
Right. Hey, we're here. Okay, let's raise the bar another notch. Let's pick up another 150 kids that are trailing behind, and let's get them where they need to be. Right. Like let's take the next level on athletic success. Okay, great. We got this many kids doing D1 scholarships. Can we double it next year? What do we need to do to be able to do that? Right. We need to raise the bar in our expectations of our education system. We must raise the bar.
100%. Yeah, that's it. I'm pretty competitive, and
Me too.
And you see, I mean, most Texans are. We're Texas, and we want to be the best at everything, and that includes our education system as a whole. We want to prepare our children to launch into the world and protect the freedoms that we have right now. And that is why this whole movement is about truly giving power back to the parents.
That's right. And there's no reason the state of Texas should be operating at the level we are on a nationwide perspective, right? I mean, we should look at that as Texans going, yeah, this isn't okay.
That's right.
And then the next question immediately we should ask is, what are we going to do about it? Here's the challenge, though, right? That's a lot of that's on the local level, where your school board has a lot to do with that.
Yes.
So go either run for school board or come support your school board or whatever it is. And then also, though, our state leaders, we got to work this out together, right? The state leadership needs to start partnering up with us to try to find ways to continue to raise the bar. And a lot of that has to do with, things that are passed. Obviously, the financial component, the legislature is huge in that, those types of things. Mm-hmm. We obviously know there's a lot of money going into public education. But in the sake of my district, I'm losing money every year to Chapter 49 of the Education Code under the recapture deal, right? Which is preventing me from giving raises to teachers that I need to be able to retain to continue to raise the bar. So this is extremely complicated stuff that local leaders, state leaders, and even not so much, I wouldn't say much for the federal government. I'm firmly believe that the doggone state is responsible for education. Absolutely. I believe that should be deferred most of the decisions to the local level. That's just what I believe, and I think it works best that way. But again, beside the point, this is a tough nut to crack. But we can't say, well, it's too hard, we're going to give up. Yep. Let's just spend billions more dollars, build a bunch more other schools that may not perform any better. Mm-hmm. We have to keep that in mind too, right? Yeah. In what we're doing from a parent choice perspective, because what's the benefit in that? Mm-hmm. You don't really solve the problem. Then you go out and you fling money in all different directions, and those schools perform no better than public schools. Mm-hmm. I mean, go look at some of the accountability ratings for some of the charter schools.
Sure.
Not great.
Yeah.
Not great either.
Yeah.
Right? So for me, it's all about strong leadership.
Yes.
That's what is needed. It's needed at the local level and it's needed at the state level. And then in that will breed a culture of excellence, which will then drive the needle in improving our kids' student outcomes.
Yes. And that accountability component, like you said,
It's huge.
It's absolutely, we've got to hold every school to a level of accountability, the expectations that each and every one of us want for our own individual child.
That's right.
And that's what this is about. It's
That's what it's
raising
about.
that bar across the board and
That's right.
ensuring we got to get Texas to the top.
Right.
We have to.
And sometimes
Because-
competition does that.
That's right.
Sometimes there's competition. Go, whoa, okay, guys. Well, we got it. Like, that's business.
Right. That's right.
That's been
That's
my
exactly
experience
right.
in business. So there's a healthy level of that would come from some type of parent choice option.
Yep.
Now, it's not needed in my district because
right.
we're already pretty competitive and
Yeah.
we have high standards, right?
Well, you've got your fast growth. Lots of people are moving. They're making
That's
the
right.
choice. These parents have the choice if they can afford to, right? I mean,
they
that's
can
the whole
afford
thing.
to.
If they can afford to, and we see this all across our state.
Yeah.
It's a lot of parents that are fleeing Austin ISD.
In
a lot of
particular,
yeah. I mean, it is. That's
The numbers are pretty startling for them.
They
yeah.
are. They're saying if you have that money, you can exercise that choice. And again, that's what this is really about. So
Yes.
there's so many excellent public schools across Texas,
There are.
and parents who can pick up and go to them.
We'll
right?
go to them. Yep.
And we need to make sure that every single child has access to a high quality education.
I could not agree more with that.
And that, I think, is where all parents kind of have locked arms and said, look, whether it's your public school or a public charter school, private school, whatever it is, we got to make sure these kids
That's right.
reach their full potential.
Yep.
So are there any other, we kind of talked a little bit about, what you've experienced here and some of the good, the bad, the ugly. Are there any other big wins that you guys took on, kind of this whole Title IX nonsense that allowing boys into the locker rooms, allowing boys to play against girls in sports and things like that? Give your district, your ISD, that again, lots of people are flooding to. Let me hear another win where the parents who locked arms and decided to take back their school board said, this is how we're going to do things now.
Yeah, I'll talk about school safety
Yeah.
because that's a big one. If you don't have a safe environment in which our kids are going to lead to learn, everything breaks down, right? It's a critical. And safety, by the way, is a feeling, how strong safety you feel. So that was a huge reason I actually decided to run for school board is we were okay on that.
Yeah.
We just weren't great on that. And so we have come up with an amazing scenario that I think works best for our district. So HB 3 passed, what was it?
2019.
2000, yep. And so there was additional requirements, and then most recently the requirement for an armed officer in every campus. That was the right move by the legislature. That was the right call. I wish a little more money would have come with it. $15,000 doesn't quite get you the armed officer that you need. It's really more about $75,000. But nonetheless, it came with some money. I appreciate that, just not enough. Here's the deal. Districts all over the state we're faced with now, how do we respond to this, right? Do we get a police force? Well, the overhead on that is crazy,
Sure.
right? And so I'm not a proponent of that. Well, let's just partner with local law enforcement. What's happening in the state of Texas right now?
There's a decline.
Decline. I mean, rightfully so. I mean, especially here where we are right now. I mean, you got a DA going after every cop that does anything. Right? It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yep.
And so you're flooding out of there. Not where I live, by the way. It's a different scenario completely. Sure. But even there, meeting with the sheriff, he's just, Rob, I can't get you there. And I said, okay, well, now we got to figure something out. So what we decided to do in our district that worked best for it is we started to hire school marshals. We went with a plan in which we would give them as much, if not more, training than is required by the state of Texas. And we actually exceeded the training capacity by a crazy amount of hours.
For our viewers who are watching, what's a school marshal?
A school marshal. So you really got three real options when it comes to school safety, right? You got to meet the HB 3 requirement of an armed officer at every campus. You got a law enforcement officer, an LEO, badge carrying, handcuff wearing, take you to jail kind of guy. He can do investigations, all that kind of stuff. We have them already in the secondary schools, so we got that covered. Then you have what's called a marshal. A marshal is basically a deputized employee that goes to extensive training with the state of Texas, with TCOL and the like, to get certified as a school marshal. And then you have the Guardian program. The Guardian program is basically where you have a teacher or another employee that you train and you arm on that school, and no one knows that that person has a weapon and those types of things. And again, the goal in that, at least for me, was in any scenario, how do you defeat the worst case scenario is you get a good guy to a gun to a bad guy with a gun as soon as you possibly can. So districts were faced with this question, right? In our district, it became very clear that we were not going to be able to get a law enforcement officer with every single campus that we have, especially as we continue to grow with one school a year for doggone near perpetuity at this point, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we went with the school marshal program where we have brought in some amazing former law enforcement, former military people. We've trained them up. They already came with extensive training.
Right.
Most of these people we have a couple guys. One was a SWAT officer. One was a former Green Beret in the military.
That's awesome.
I mean, you talk about credentialed.
Right.
Right? And these people immediately, when we put this thing out there, they start applying for this job. They go, I want to serve and protect our kids. Right? So
awesome.
that was a huge win for us because that is that's a culture thing, right? Like, wait a minute, because everybody started thinking, we're arming the teachers, right? Which, by the way, I'm like, no, guys, again, I'm been in security a long time, military. That's not the solution. Now, for a rural district where they have no other option, sure, do that. Great, right? For us, though, we knew we had enough people, so we implemented that program 6 months after I was elected because it was that important for us, for me personally, to continue to push the envelope to say, listen, we're not going to wait for all the deputies to come and all this. I said, we need to do this now because every day we don't have somebody there, our kids are at more risk than they otherwise would have been, right? So that's kind of minutia of like school board governance.
That's great.
But school safety is critical. We've done that. It's critical at every level, and we don't need any more tragedy in the state of Texas because we didn't have the right people at the right places.
That's right. And I can only imagine it serves as a deterrent.
Absolutely.
More than anything. There's, in your district, any of these psychopath, maniacal murderers that could even think about harming kids, knowing there's somebody armed over there.
And they are well trained to be able to take you out.
That's right. That's right. I love it.
And they'll do it fast. And so you tie that with physical security improvements, all those types of things. Our district, there's a lot of money out there for it. And I'm thankful for the state for it. We've applied for several grants, and now we have millions of extra dollars that is coming in by way of grants. So thank you, State of Texas, for that. That's going to allow us to make all the the physical security improvements we need to make, perimeter fencing requirements we're going to make. We're not turning our schools into prison. But what we are doing is we're putting every opportunity to mitigate threats to our kids so they can go to school every day feeling comfortable, feeling safe, knowing that we got somebody there whose sole purpose is to look out for their welfare.
I love it. That's amazing. Well, great job on y'all implementing that program. That's wonderful. This has been great to hear. Everything that's going on, I appreciate it. I'm constantly faced with people who have this notion that if you support school choice of any form, that somehow you're anti-public school or anti-teacher.
I've got that.
Absolutely. It could not be further from the truth. I'm all about empowering parents and ensuring that the next generation of Texas is ready to lead the nation and, quite frankly, the world, because that's what Texans do. So thank you for coming on and talking about all the great work that you all are doing and how you really took back your school board to be there for parents and kids. Before we wrap up, could you look in that camera right there?
Right there.
Right there.
Hi, buddy.
And tell the parents, the potential future ISD trustees, what we can be doing together to ensure that we are lifting them up and taking back our education system.
Yeah, thank you, Mandy. So for everybody at home, hey, listen, I never in a million years thought I'd be sitting at this table chatting about the things we're chatting about today. But I got called and I answered the call, right? That's what we need to do as parents. We need to answer the call to work together as a community in your local communities to strive for the very, very best that your public schools can provide your children. That's it. And that can take a lot of different shapes and forms. It can just involve your personal engagement with a teacher. That's good. That's a great place to start. Understand what your teacher is teaching and how your child is doing. That's a great place to start. It could be you're running the PTA or PTO organization at your school, right? Mobilizing parents and encouraging them to get highly involved and supporting teachers. By the way, we didn't even talk about this, Mandy. Being a teacher right now is hard work. The requirements continue to get greater and greater, and last I checked, they get paid way too little. Support your teachers, and then take over the governance of your school board if you're not pleased with it. If you don't think the people that are governing your schools align with the values that you have, work together as a community and go win, right? It's what we did. We're far from perfect. If I was sit here and say I'm the perfect school board trustee, I'd be lying to you to your face. Not perfect, but boy, we're trying real hard. And we're trying real hard because we want to look after our kids. We want to do it in a common sense way, and we want to give them every opportunity to succeed. If every single public school in the state of Texas focused on those things, we wouldn't be talking about some of this other stuff we're talking about in the state of Texas. So that's my message to you.
Thank you, Rob, and
You're
I'm
welcome.
with you. Go win, Mom and Dad.
Go win. Let's go.
That's exactly what we have to do. Well, thank you for your service to America. Thank you for your service to your community. Thank you for joining us on Parent Empowerment with Mandy Drogin, and now you have the power.